Hi guys, I hope you're still doing well and I hope you're keeping up with your work on a daily basis so that you won't get too far behind. On the screen, you should recognize the two graphs that you see because you saw those same two graphs at the end of your Ed puzzle that you did on Friday. And what I asked you to do with those is to find as many similarities and differences as you could. So we're going to review some of the answers that you gave, but we're also going to talk about some other similarities and differences that were not mentioned. The most obvious is that both graphs use bars to show the data. They're both bar graphs. A histogram is a special type of bar graph that we'll talk more about later. Another similarity is that, of course, they both have titles on the graph, and they have these numbers labeled telling you what they stand for. There should be a label down here that says weights in pounds, and then this label should say countries. Now, there's actually more differences in the two graphs than there are similarities, so we're really going to focus on the differences. What I want you to take note of is that the bar graph on the right, that represents categorical data. If you'll remember about a week or so ago, we discussed the differences between categorical and numerical data. Categorical data is where, when you do a survey, you're given a response that would be a word. For instance, if I ask you, what's your favorite color? Your response would be blue, red, green, yellow, orange. Those are words. If I ask you, what's your favorite sport? You may say baseball, soccer, football. Those are words. That's categorical data. For a histogram, you will not see any categorical data. You will see numbers on both the horizontal, that's this axis, and the vertical axis. So histograms display only numerical data. Okay, another difference is that the histogram on the left, you'll notice that the bars touch, and the bar graph on the right, the bars do not touch. Several of you mentioned in your differences that you noticed that the bars touch on one but not on the other. Now, in a histogram, the bars must touch each other. The only time that you would have a gap in a bar is if your frequency was 0 for that particular number. And the reason the bars touch, let's look at the histogram of weights. If you'll notice, the weights are put into groups. The first group of weights is 100 to 125. Then the next group of weights is 126 to 150. Then the next group is 151 to 175. Those are intervals or groups of weight. And the reason that the bars touch is because once they develop that first group that started with 100, that goes all the way through the last group that ends with 250. Well, once they began that first interval, no numbers were left out. In other words, if you were counting, 125 would come right next to 126 when you count. 150 is right beside 151. So the reason the bars touch is because all the numerical values are included, in this case, from 100 all the way to 250. So remember, when you are making a histogram, the bars must touch. A regular bar graph that displays categorical data, the bars do not touch because the USA is not related, it's not the same as the country of Mexico. Yes, they're all countries, but these do not touch because they are 3 separate categories. If I was doing a survey on your favorite animal, we would not want the bars to touch because a cat would be a different category than a dog or a rabbit. So make sure you remember bars have to touch with a histogram because all of the numbers are included once you begin that first interval. Okay, another difference, which I've briefly already talked about, is that in a histogram, you will have intervals of numbers. not categories or words, but numbers. These are called intervals or groups. See, when they did this, a lot of people recorded their weight for this particular survey. If I ask you how many people weighed between 100 and 125, you would be able to tell me. If I said how many people weighed 126 to 150, I can't read those numbers, but it would be this number of people. So a histogram has interval of numbers. A regular bar graph would have categories or words. Okay, now that we've gone through some of the similarities and differences, I want to look at a few more histograms, and I'm going to ask you questions and make sure that you can read or answer questions based on this histogram. So, as with any graph, you need to always make sure you read the title. So in this case, the title is Sit-Up Competition, and it's going to show us the number of sit-ups that people did. On your x-axis, this label says number of sit-ups. That means all of these numbers or groups of numbers or intervals of numbers tell you the number of sit-ups. And then on the vertical axis, these numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, stand for the number of people. So if I said to you, how many people did 21 to 40 sit-ups? You would find the interval of 21 to 40, go up and back over, and your frequency or your number of people is 6. Now, the important thing to know is I can't tell if those 6 people did 21 sit-ups. I don't know if one of them did 30 sit-ups. So we don't know specifically exactly the number of sit-ups that those 6 people did, but we do know that 6 people did anywhere from 21 to 40. Let's calculate now the number of people that did between 1 and 60 sit-ups. Let's calculate the number of people that did between 1 and 60 sit-ups. So again, that would include these 3 bars. The first bar, 6 people did 1 to 20 sit-ups. Again, we don't know specifically whether those 6 people did 5 sit-ups, 7, 10, whatever. We do know that they fall between anywhere in the in the interval of 1 to 20. 6 people did 21 to 40, and 6 people did 41 to 60. So if we add all of those numbers or in frequency of people up, we would get 18 people. 18 people did anywhere from 1 to 60 sit-ups. Okay, another question. Did more people do 81 to 100 sit-ups or 101 to 120 sit-ups? Did more people do 81 to 100 or 101 to 120? More people did 81 to 100 because that bar is taller. So these are fairly easy to read. It's just like reading a bar graph, but I do want you to take note of the intervals. Now, another thing that I need to mention about these intervals, if we were to count 1 to 20, that is a group of 20. When we start making histograms, you're going to really have to know that when you group the numbers in intervals, that all of your groups have to be the same. You don't want to group group numbers by 20 and then go to 10 and then 5. So what you'll notice is that each one of these is a group of 20 or an interval of 20. Okay, let's look at another histogram. The title of this one is Peppermint Candies in a Jar, or per jar. The numbers on the horizontal or x-axis stand for the number of peppermint candies. So again, those peppermint candies, the number of them have been put into groups or interval. This is an interval or a group of 5. This is an interval or a group of 5. This is an interval, a group of 5, and so on. All of those are groups of 5. And then on the vertical axis, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25, they stand for the number of jars. Now I want you to look at this gap and this gap. Remember, in a histogram, the bars do have to touch, but sometimes you will have a couple of gaps, and that is only because there were no jars that had between 15 and 19. And there were no jars, 0 jars, that had between 35 and 39 peppermint candies. So the only time you'll see gaps in a histogram is if the frequency is 0. Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions about this one and we will be done. How many jars had between 20 and 34 pieces of candy? How many jars had between 20 and 34 pieces? So that would include all 3 of these intervals. So 10 jars had 20 to 24, 20 jars had 25 to 29, and 10 jars had 30 to 34. So you would add all those up, 20, 30, and you would get 40 jars. Okay, which interval had the least number of peppermint candies? Which interval had the least number of peppermint candies, or number of jars? Sorry, I messed up on that one. Which interval had the least number of jars? So that means you would look for the lowest bar, and that interval would be 10 to 14. Okay, there's one more question. If I ask you how many total jars were reported in this survey, total jars, then this is going to be a little bit tricky and it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not that difficult, but it's just going to take time. If I said how many total jars were reported in this survey, well, that means you're going to have to add up all of the bars. So this bar goes to 15. This one goes to 25, 5, 10, 20, 10 jars for that one, 15 jars that had 40 to 44 peppermints, and 25 jars that had 45 to 49. So if I said how many total jars had candy in them, then you would have to add up all of the frequencies. So I'm not going to add all these up, but you could add all of those frequencies and that would give you the total number of jars. Let's go back to this histogram. If I said how many total people did sit-ups, I said how many total people did sit-ups, then that means all of the people. Well, 6 people did this many sit-ups. 6 people did 21 to 40 sit-ups. 6 people did 41 to 60 sit-ups. 7 people did 61 to 80. 3 people did 81 to 100. And 2 people did 101 to 120. So to find the total number of people that did sit-ups, you would simply add all of those numbers. Okay, and that is how you read or answer questions about histograms. We will be talking about histograms throughout this week, and you will be doing different types of activities with those histograms, including eventually we will get to making them.